They say blood is thicker than water, but in the winter of 1842, inside the cold stone walls of Magdalen Manor, Ella Magdalen learned that gold was the only currency that truly mattered. 3 strokes of a fountain pen. That was all it took to erase her entire existence. She wasn't just a daughter grieving her father. She was an obstacle to be removed. She stood in the rain, shivering, watching the gates of her childhood home slam shut, convinced her life was already over. What she didn't know was that in the shadows, a man the world called a monster was watching, waiting to make his move. This wasn't a fairy tale. It was the story of how she lost everything, and the dangerous duke who helped her burn their world to the ground. The smell of beeswax and stale tobacco had always comforted me. It was the scent of my father, Baron Frederick Magdalen. But today, sitting in the high-backed leather chair of his library, that scent only made the nausea in my stomach churn violently. The room was suffocatingly full, not with mourners who cared, but with vultures. My stepmother, Lady Catherine, sat across from me. She was wearing a black mourning gown that cost more than most families earned in a year. Her handkerchief was pressed to her eyes, but I knew better. Her eyes were dry. Standing behind her was her son, my stepbrother, Thomas. He was 19, the same age as me, but soft in the middle and cruel in the eyes. He was picking at his fingernails, bored. And then there was Mr. Arthur Henderson, the family solicitor, a man whose spine was as flexible as his morals. He cleared his throat, the sound sharp in the quiet room. "If we are all settled," Henderson said, his eyes darting nervously toward Catherine, "we shall proceed with the last will and testament of Baron Frederick Magdalen." "Please, Mr. Henderson," Catherine sighed, her voice trembling theatrically. "Just get it over with. My heart can barely take the strain." I gripped the armrests of my chair. "Where is the codicil?" I asked. My voice sounded foreign to my own ears, hollow, brittle. "Father wrote a codicil 3 months ago," he told me. "He secured the dowry and the deed to the dower house for me." Henderson didn't look at me. He looked at the paper. "I'm afraid, Miss Ella, that no such codicil exists in the official registry. We are operating off the will dated 1838. 1838. Before my father knew Catherine's true nature, before he realized Thomas was gambling away the estate's income." "That's impossible." I stood up. "I saw him sign it. I witnessed it." "You are a hysterical girl who has just lost her father," Catherine snapped. The mask of grief slipped for a fraction of a second, revealing the predator underneath. "Sit down, Ella." Henderson read on. The words blurred into a hum of legalese, but the impact was like a hammer shattering glass. The estate? To Catherine, to be held in trust for Thomas. The accounts? To Catherine. The London townhouse? To Catherine. And to my daughter, Ella Magdalen. Henderson paused. He actually looked pained for a moment. "I leave the sum of £50 and my best wishes for her future endeavours." The silence that followed was deafening. £50. It wouldn't last 6 months in London. "There is one more condition," Henderson added, his voice dropping to a whisper. "Lady Catherine has petitioned, and the late Baron agreed in this draft, that should Ella Magdalen remain unmarried by her 20th year, her residence at Magdalen Manor is at the discretion of the primary beneficiary." I looked at Thomas. He smirked. "I want her room," he said simply. "It has the best view of the lake." Catherine stood, smoothing her skirts. She didn't look at the solicitor. She looked directly at me. "You are unmarried, Ella. And frankly, with your lack of prospects and your difficult temperament, You are a burden this estate can no longer support. Thomas needs his space." "You can't mean to evict me," I whispered. "It's been 3 days since he died. 3 days." "Oh, don't be dramatic." Catherine waved a hand dismissively. "We are not heartless. You can stay the night. But you must be gone by noon tomorrow. I've heard the textile mills in Manchester are looking for strong girls. Perhaps you'll find your calling there." "This is my house!" I screamed, the rage finally breaking through the shock. "My mother built this library. My blood is in these stones." "And now," Thomas laughed, stepping forward, "your blood is walking out the door." I looked at Henderson, begging him with my eyes to stop this madness. He closed his ledger and began packing his bag. "I am sorry, Miss Ella. The law is the law." I ran. I didn't want them to see me cry. I ran up the grand staircase, past the portraits of my ancestors who seemed to glare down in judgment, and into my room. I locked the door and collapsed against it, sliding to the floor. I had nothing. No allies. No money. No family. Or so I thought. That night, as a storm battered the windows, I packed a single trunk. My mother's locket, a few sturdy dresses, and my journals. I wouldn't give them the satisfaction of kicking me out at noon. I would leave before the sun rose. I slipped out the servants' entrance at 4:00 a.m. The rain was freezing, turning the dirt road into a river of mud. I dragged my trunk through the sludge, my boots soaking through instantly. I had no plan. I would walk to the village, perhaps catch the mail coach to London. Though what I would do there, I didn't know. I was a mile from the gates, drenched and shivering so violently my teeth chattered when I heard the thunder of hooves. I moved to the side of the road, expecting a farmer or a mail carrier. Instead, a carriage emerged from the mist. It was massive, painted a black so deep it seemed to absorb the moonlight. The Madeleine family crest was not on the door. Instead, there was a silver emblem, a wolf devouring a serpent. The carriage didn't pass me. It slowed, the wheels grinding in the mud, and came to a halt right beside me. The door swung open. A man sat inside. He was shrouded in shadow, but I caught the glint of a heavy gold ring and the sharp angle of a jawline that looked like it was cut from granite. "Get in," a deep voice commanded. It wasn't an offer. It was an order. I don't know you," I stammered, clutching my shawl tighter. The man leaned forward. The carriage lantern illuminated his face. He had dark hair, silvering at the temples, and eyes that were an unnerving shade of steel grey. A scar ran through his left eyebrow. I froze. I knew that face. Everyone in the county knew that face, though few had seen it in person for a decade. It was Julian Thorne, the Duke of Blackwood, the man they called the Devil of Derbyshire. Rumours said he had killed his own brother for the title. Rumours said he practiced dark arts in his isolated estate. "Ella Madeleine," he said, knowing my name. "You can stand there and die of pneumonia, or you can get in. I won't ask a third time." "Why?" I asked, the wind whipping my hair across my face. "Why are you here?" "Because," the Duke said, his eyes locking onto mine with an intensity that made me forget the cold. "Your father was a fool, but he was the only man who never lied to me. And I promised him that if the vultures ever came for you, I wouldn't let them pick the bones." I looked back toward Madeleine Manor, invisible in the dark rain. Then I looked at the gloved hand he extended toward me. I took it. The interior of the Duke's carriage was warmer than any room in my father's house had been for years. It smelled of leather, expensive brandy, and rain. I sat on the velvet squabs, dripping wet, shivering uncontrollably. Julian Thorne did not offer me a blanket. He did not offer comforting words. He simply tapped the roof of the carriage with his cane, and the vehicle lurched forward, picking up speed. "There is a dry cloak under the seat," he said, not looking at me. He was staring out the window into the pitch blackness. "Put it on. You're ruining the upholstery." It was a cruel thing to say, but his tone lacked malice. It was pragmatic. I found the cloak, heavy wool, lined with silk, and wrapped it around myself, discarding my soaked shawl. The warmth was instant, painful as blood rushed back to my frozen skin. "You were at the funeral," I said. It wasn't a question. "I was in the trees," he corrected. "I don't do churches, and I certainly don't do crowds of hypocrites pretending to mourn a man they cheated at cards." I stiffened. "My father was a good man." "Your father was a trusting man," Julian countered sharply, finally turning his gaze to me. "In our world, Ella, that is a fatal flaw. He trusted your stepmother. He trusted your solicitor, that snake Henderson. And look where it got him. 6 feet under with a stomach full of indigestion and a daughter left to rot." My breath hitched. "Indigestion? The doctor said it was heart failure." Julian let out a dark, humorless laugh. "Dr. Silas Grayson signed that death certificate, didn't he? Grayson owes £3,000 to the gambling dens in London, a debt that was miraculously cleared yesterday." I felt the blood drain from my face. "You're saying murder?" "I'm saying nothing," Julian said, leaning back. "I am merely observing. And right now, my observation is that you are a lamb who has just walked out of a slaughterhouse. You need to become a wolf, Ella. Fast." The carriage ride took hours. We travelled deep into the Derbyshire peaks, the roads becoming winding and treacherous. By the time we slowed, dawn was breaking, casting a grey, sickly light over the landscape. Blackwood Manor was not like my home. Magdalen Manor was elegant, manicured and welcoming. Blackwood was a fortress. It sat on a cliff edge, overlooking a churning river. The stone was dark, covered in ivy that looked like veins strangling the building. Gargoyles perched on the eaves, staring down at us. "Welcome to purgatory," Julian muttered, as the carriage stopped. The massive oak doors opened before we even ascended the steps. A row of servants stood there. Not the chatty, friendly staff I was used to, but silent, stone-faced figures. "Mrs. Gable," Julian addressed the housekeeper, a severe woman with grey hair pulled back so tight it pulled at her eyes. "Miss Magdalen will be staying in the East Wing. See that she is bathed, fed, and that her clothes are burned." "Burned?" I protested, clutching my trunk. "But they are rags," Julian cut me off, "and they smell of failure. If you are to live under my roof, you will look the part of a guest, not a beggar." He turned to leave, walking toward a set of double doors that I assumed led to his study. "Wait," I called out. He paused but didn't turn. "You said you promised my father." "What exactly did you promise him?" Julian turned his head slightly, his profile sharp against the dim light of the hallway. "I promised him that I would balance the scales. Get some sleep, Ella. Tomorrow, we begin." "Begin what?" "Your education," he said, and the doors slammed shut behind him. I was led to the East Wing. The room was magnificent, far grander than anything at Magdalen Manor, but it was cold. The furniture was heavy Victorian Gothic, the drapes velvet. As Mrs. Gable poured hot water into a copper tub, I noticed something on the vanity table. It was a newspaper, the London Gazette, dated 3 days prior. It was folded open to the social column. I read the headline, "The recluse Duke of Blackwood, rumoured to return to society. Is he hunting for a wife or hunting for revenge?" I sank into the hot water, the heat stinging my skin. I realized then that I hadn't just been saved. I had been drafted. Julian Thorne didn't just want to protect me, he wanted to use me. And as I thought of Catherine's smirk and Thomas's cruelty, I realized something else. I wanted to be used. The next morning, I awoke to the sound of shouting. I dressed quickly in a gown Mrs. Gable had left out, a deep navy silk that fit surprisingly well, and followed the noise. It was coming from the main atrium. I peered over the banister. Julian was standing in the center of the hall. Standing opposite him were two men. One was a stranger, a burly man with a rough coat. The other... My heart stopped. It was Mr. Henderson, the solicitor. He looked terrified, clutching his hat to his chest, sweat glistening on his bald head. I didn't know, Your Grace," Henderson stammered. "I was merely following the widow's instructions." "You were following the instructions of a thief." Julian's voice was low, a rumble of thunder. He didn't yell. He didn't need to. The menace rolled off him in waves. "You forged the date on the will, Henderson. You buried the codicil. I have no idea what you—" Julian moved. He was faster than a man of his size should be. In a blink, he had Henderson by the lapels, lifting the small man onto his toes. "Do not lie to me," Julian snarled. "I have eyes everywhere. I know about the payments from Lady Catherine. I know about the duplicate ledger you keep in your floorboards." I gasped, the sound echoing in the hall. Julian looked up, his eyes locking with mine on the landing. He didn't let go of Henderson. "Ah, Ella," Julian said, a cruel smile touching his lips. "Come down. Mr. Henderson was just explaining how he's going to help us get your house back." Henderson whimpered. I can't. She has leverage on me. Terrible leverage." Julian dropped him. Henderson scrambled back, looking between me and the Duke. "Then you have a choice," Julian said, straightening his cuffs. "You can fear Lady Catherine's leverage, or you can fear me." He took a step forward, and the shadow he cast seemed to swallow the solicitor whole. "And I assure you, Arthur," Julian whispered, "my bite is far worse than her bark." Mr. Henderson fled Blackwood Manor like a rat escaping a sinking ship. I watched from the landing as his carriage rattled away into the mist, the wheels kicking up gravel. When I turned back, Julian was already retreating into his study, the heavy oak doors left slightly ajar. An invitation, or perhaps a test. I walked down the stairs, my hand trembling on the cold railing. The fear was still there, a cold knot in my chest, but it was being rapidly overtaken by a new sensation. Curiosity. I pushed the study door open. The room was a cavern of knowledge and shadows. Floor-to-ceiling bookshelves groaned under the weight of leather-bound volumes. A fire crackled in the massive hearth, casting dancing orange light over a desk scattered with maps, ledgers, and architectural blueprints. Julian stood by the window, pouring an amber liquid into 2 crystal tumblers. "He will talk, you know," I said, my voice quiet but steady. "Henderson, he is weak. Catherine will break him just as easily as you did." "He won't talk," Julian replied, not turning around. "Because I gave him something Catherine cannot. I gave him a way out. I bought his debt notes from the bank this morning. If he betrays us, he goes to debtor's prison. If he helps us, he retires to a cottage in Sussex. Men like Henderson don't follow loyalty, Ella. They follow the path of least resistance." He turned and extended a glass to me. "Drink. It's brandy. You'll need it." I took the glass. The smell was sharp, burning my nose. "I don't drink spirits." "You do now." He took a sip, watching me over the rim of his glass. "If you are to survive the viper pit of London society, you need to develop a tolerance for poison, both literal and metaphorical." I took a small sip. It burned, making me cough, but the warmth spread through my chest, steadying my nerves. So, what is the plan? Do we sue them? Take the forged will to court? Julian laughed, a low, rough sound. The law is a rich man's game, Ella, and right now, legally you are a pauper. If we go to court, it will take years. Catherine has your father's money to bribe judges. You have nothing. No, we are not going to sue them. He walked over to the desk and slammed his hand down on a stack of papers. We are going to destroy them publicly, socially, financially. We are going to make them pariahs, so that when we finally do take back the house, the world will cheer for their downfall. He gestured to the chair opposite the desk. Sit. For the next week, Blackwood Manor ceased to be a home and became a military academy. My day began at 5 a.m. There were no leisurely breakfasts. There was work. Julian was a relentless tutor. He didn't teach me how to embroider or play the pianoforte. Skills my stepmother had insisted were the only things useful for a girl. He taught me the things men kept for themselves. Read this, he commanded on the third day, tossing a thick ledger onto my lap. It's the account book for the Blackwood tenant farms, I said, flipping through the pages. Find the error. I don't know accounting. Learn. He went back to his correspondence. You have 1 hour. If you don't find it, you skip dinner. I stared at the rows of numbers until my eyes watered. Columns of grain sold, livestock purchased, wages paid. It was a foreign language. But as the clock ticked, panic sharpened my mind. I began to look for patterns, and then I saw it. Here, I said, 40 minutes later. The feed costs for the sheep in the north pasture. They're listed at 4 shillings a bushel, but on page 12, the market rate for the same month is listed as 2 shillings. Julian looked up, a flicker of approval in those steel-grey eyes. Correct. My steward was skimming the difference. I fired him last month. Catherine is doing the same to your father's estate, but on a much larger scale. She's not just spending the money. She's laundering it to Thomas's gambling creditors. To catch her, you must understand the flow of gold. But it wasn't just numbers. It was psychology. In the evenings, we sat by the fire, and he would drill me on the peerage. He had a terrifyingly detailed memory of every scandal, every affair, and every debt of every noble family in England. Lord Pembroke, he would quiz me. What is his weakness? He drinks, I recited. Too simple. Everyone drinks. Look deeper. He is desperate for a male heir. His wife has only given him daughters. Precisely, Julian nodded, and because of that, he is susceptible to anyone who introduces him to alternative medical treatments. That is leverage. Lady Danbury? A gossip, vicious. And why is she vicious? I paused, thinking back to the notes he had made me memorize. Because she was a wallflower in her youth. She attacks before she can be attacked. Good, Julian murmured. He stood up and walked around the desk, stopping just inches from me. The air in the room seemed to tighten. You are learning to see the cracks in the armor, Ella. But now, we must address your own armor. He rang a bell. Mrs. Gable entered, followed by 2 seamstresses I didn't recognize. They were carrying bolts of fabric that shimmered in the firelight. The season begins in earnest on Friday, Julian announced. The Duchess of Bedford is hosting her winter masquerade. Everyone will be there, including Catherine and Thomas. My stomach flipped. I can't go there. I'm in mourning. I'm a cast-off. You are a Madeline, Julian corrected, and you are under the protection of the House of Blackwood. You will not go as a mourning daughter. You will go as an avenging angel. He reached out and touched a bolt of fabric, a deep, blood-red velvet that looked almost black in the dim light. No pastels, Julian instructed the seamstresses. No white, no pinks. She is not a debutante. She is a woman who has survived a storm. Cut it low in the back, high in the neck, long sleeves, severe, yet undeniable. He looked at me, his gaze traveling from my eyes to my lips, and for a moment the mentor vanished, and I saw the man. The silence stretched, heavy and electric. My heart hammered against my ribs, not from fear, but from a strange, magnetic pull I hadn't expected. "Make her look," Julian whispered, his voice rough, like something they cannot afford to touch. The days blurred into a haze of preparation. I learned to walk not with the demure shuffle of a young lady, but with the purposeful stride of a predator. Julian taught me how to hold a gaze until the other person looked away. He taught me how to answer a question with a question. But the hardest lesson came the night before the ball. I was standing in front of the mirror in the library, practicing my curtsy. Julian was watching from his chair, a book neglected in his lap. "You're still slouching," he observed. "You're making yourself small." "Why?" "Habit," I admitted. "For years, if I was small, Catherine didn't notice me. If I was quiet, Thomas didn't mock me." Julian stood and crossed the room. He moved behind me, so we were both looking at our reflections in the tall gilt mirror. He was a tower of darkness behind my pale form. He placed his hands on my shoulders, heavy, warm, grounding. "Look at me, Ella," he commanded. Our eyes met in the glass. Catherine and Thomas rely on that fear. They bank on the fact that the girl they threw out into the rain is the same girl who will walk into that ballroom. If you walk in with your shoulders slumped, you are proving them right. He pressed his thumbs into my shoulders, forcing me to straighten my spine. "You have nothing to lose," he whispered into my ear, his breath stirring a loose tendril of my hair. "They have already taken your home. They have taken your inheritance. What else can they do to you?" "They can humiliate me," I whispered. "Only if you value their opinion," Julian countered. "Do you?" I looked at the reflection. I saw the scared girl. But then I looked at Julian. The scar on his brow, the hardness of his jaw. He was a man who had been ostracized, rumored about, feared, and he stood tall. "No," I said, the word gaining strength. "I don't." "Good." His hands lingered for a second longer than necessary, his thumbs brushing the hollow of my collarbone. The sensation sent a shiver down my spine that had nothing to do with the cold. "Then tomorrow, we go to war." The carriage ride to London was silent. The rhythmic clatter of hooves on cobblestones acted as a metronome for my racing heart. Outside, the city was a blur of gas lamps and fog. We arrived at the Duke of Bedford's townhouse in Grosvenor Square, just as the clock struck 10. The street was jammed with carriages. The air was filled with the sounds of shouting drivers, the rustle of silk, and the manic energy of the aristocracy at play. I adjusted my mask. It was black lace, delicate but obscuring. Julian wore a simple black domino mask that did little to hide his identity. His presence alone was a signature. "Ready?" he asked, offering his arm as the footman opened the door. "No," I admitted. "Perfect." He pulled me out of the carriage. Fear makes you sharp. We ascended the grand staircase. The noise of the ballroom washed over us, a cacophony of violins, laughter, and the clinking of crystal. The major domo at the top of the stairs struck his staff against the floor. "His Grace, the Duke of Blackwood," the announcer bellowed. The room didn't go quiet immediately, but a ripple of silence spread outward, like a stone dropped in a pond. Heads turned, fans snapped shut, and the announcer hesitated. He looked at the card Julian had handed him. He looked at me. I stood tall, my spine straight, the blood-red velvet of my gown pooling around me like a pool of wine. "Miss Ella Madeline." The silence was total now. For 3 seconds no one moved. I felt hundreds of eyes boring into me. I saw the whispers starting behind hands. The banished daughter, with the devil of Derbyshire. Scandalous. Then Julian moved. He didn't rush. He walked me into the room with the casual arrogance of a king entering his own court. "Keep your chin up," he murmured, barely moving his lips. "Find them." I scanned the room through the lace of my mask. It didn't take long. They were holding court near the champagne fountain. Lady Catherine was wearing purple, the colour of royalty, she liked to think. Thomas was beside her, looking flushed and already unsteady on his feet. They were laughing at something Lord Harrington was saying. When they saw us, the laughter died in their throats. Catherine's face went slack. Thomas dropped his glass. It shattered, the sound echoing in the hushed room. "Shall we?" Julian asked. We walked straight toward them. The crowd parted for us, eager for the confrontation. This was better than any opera. "Stepmother," I said, my voice cool and projecting clearly over the murmurs. "Thomas, you seem surprised. Did you think the rain would melt me?" Catherine recovered quickly. She forced a tight, poisonous smile. "Ella, we were told you had gone to the industrial districts to find work suited to your station." "I found a different sort of work," I said, glancing at Julian. "Indeed," Catherine sneered, her eyes raking over my dress. "I see you have found a patron. Though I must say, Your Grace," she nodded stiffly at Julian, "you have strange taste in charity cases. This girl has a history of hysteria." "And you, Lady Catherine," Julian's voice was a deep rumble that seemed to vibrate the floorboards, "have a history of creative accounting." The colour drained from Catherine's face. "I beg your pardon?" "We are not here to exchange pleasantries," Julian said. "We are here to dance." He turned his back on her, the ultimate insult, and led me onto the dance floor. The orchestra, sensing the tension, struck up a waltz. Julian pulled me into his frame. His hand on my waist was firm, possessive. We began to move. "She is terrified," I whispered as we spun. "Did you see her hands shaking?" "I did," Julian said. "But Thomas is the weak link. Look at him." Over Julian's shoulder, I saw Thomas. He wasn't looking at us. He was looking at the door, sweating. He signaled to a waiter for another drink. "He's crumbling," Julian noted. "Tonight we apply pressure. While I distract the mothers, you corner the son. Can you do that?" "Yes," I said. The dance ended. Julian bowed, his eyes lingering on mine. "Go." He moved toward a group of influential peers, instantly drawing the attention of the room. I slipped away, weaving through the crowd, tracking Thomas. I found him on the terrace, smoking a cigar with trembling hands. The cold night air was a relief after the stifling ballroom. "Thomas," I said. He jumped, nearly dropping the cigar. "Ella, what the hell are you doing here? You're supposed to be gone." "I'm back," I said, walking to the stone balustrade. "And I know, Thomas." "Know what?" he snapped, though his voice cracked. "I know about the debts," I lied. Well, it was a half lie. Julian suspected debts, but I stated it as fact. "I know about the men you owe money to in the East End, the ones who don't accept IOUs." Thomas turned pale. You're bluffing." "Am I?" I stepped closer. "Henderson told us everything. He told us how you forced him to alter the will, how you threatened him." "It wasn't me," Thomas blurted out, the alcohol loosening his tongue and his fear doing the rest. "It was Mother. She made me do it. She said if I didn't help her, she'd cut me off and let the creditors break my legs." My heart hammered. A confession. She forged the date? I pressed, keeping my voice calm. She traced father's signature, Thomas hissed, looking over his shoulder. She practiced for weeks. Ella, listen, you can't tell anyone. If the banks find out the estate is in probate dispute, they'll freeze the assets. I'll be ruined. They'll kill me. Then help me, I said. Help you? Give me the practice sheets, I said. The ones she used to trace the signature. I know she kept them. She keeps everything. Thomas hesitated. She keeps them in the safe in her boudoir. I don't have the key. But you know where she hides it, I guessed. Thomas looked at me, sweat dripping down his temple. If I get them for you, will you tell the Duke to call off his dogs? I know he's looking into my markers. Get me the proof, I said, and I will ensure you walk away with enough to pay your debts. But only you. Catherine goes down. Thomas looked at the ballroom, where his mother was frantically trying to maintain her composure. Then he looked at me. Self-preservation 1. Tomorrow, he whispered. At the old folly near the creek. Noon, I'll bring what I can find. Ella! Catherine's voice shrilled from the doorway. She stood there, eyes blazing. Thomas immediately stepped back, looking guilty. Get away from him, Catherine hissed, storming onto the terrace. You poison everything you touch. I should have had you thrown in the asylum, not just the street. Try it. A voice came from the shadows. Julian stepped out, the darkness seemingly clinging to his coat. He stood beside me, a silent sentinel. Catherine stopped dead. She looked from me to Julian, and for the first time, she realized the magnitude of her mistake. She wasn't fighting a lonely girl anymore. She was fighting a united front. This isn't over, Catherine spat, grabbing Thomas by the arm. Come, Thomas, we are leaving. They retreated, but it was a retreat of defeat. The murmurs followed them out. I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. My knees felt weak. Julian's hand was there instantly, gripping my elbow to steady me. You did well, he said softly. Thomas cracked, I told him, adrenaline making my words fast. He admitted she forged the signature. He's going to bring me proof tomorrow. Julian went still. His grip on my arm tightened slightly, not in support, but in warning. Tomorrow? He asked. Where? The old folly. On the estate grounds. Julian's face darkened. He looked out over the dark garden, his expression grim. He won't bring you proof, Ella, Julian said heavily. What? But he was terrified. He is a cornered rat, Julian interrupted. And rats don't negotiate. They bite. He looked down at me, his eyes fierce. He isn't going there to give you papers. He's going there to silence you. A chill swept through me that had nothing to do with the winter air. Then we don't go, I said. No, Julian said, a dangerous smile slowly spreading across his face. We go. But we don't go alone. And we certainly don't go to talk. He took my hand and raised it to his lips, kissing the knuckles. You wanted your home back, Ella. Tomorrow, we take it. By force. The folly sat on the edge of the Madeleine estate, a crumbling imitation of a Greek temple built by my grandfather during a bout of architectural madness. It was a lonely place, overgrown with brambles and hidden from the main house by a dense copse of oak trees. The weather had turned. The crisp cold of the previous night had dissolved into a thick, suffocating fog that rolled off the lake, obscuring the world in shades of grey. We left the carriage a mile back. Julian insisted on it. If it is a trap, he whispered, checking the priming on a pair of flintlock pistols he had taken from a velvet case. We do not announce our arrival with carriage wheels. He handed me a small, heavy object. A whistle. If you see anyone other than Thomas, he instructed, his voice low and grave. "You blow this. You do not run. You drop to the ground and cover your head. Do you understand?" "I understand," I said, my fingers curling around the cold brass. "And Ella?" He paused, his gloved hand cupping my cheek for the briefest moment. His eyes searched mine, stripping away the bravado I was trying so hard to wear. "Do not let him get within arm's reach. Desperation makes men strong." I walked toward the folly alone. Julian melted into the fog, moving into the tree line with the silent grace of a phantom. I was the bait. I reached the clearing. The stone pillars of the folly loomed out of the mist, like the ribcage of some great, dead beast. Thomas was already there. He was pacing back and forth, kicking at loose stones. He wore a heavy greatcoat, the collar turned up. He looked haggard. His eyes were red-rimmed, his skin pasty. He didn't look like a man who had come to make a deal. He looked like a man who had come to the end of a rope. "You came," he called out when he saw me emerge from the mist. His voice was high, cracking slightly. "I came for the truth, Thomas," I said, stopping 10 paces away. "Do you have it?" He let out a jagged laugh. "The truth. You always were obsessed with the truth, Ella. Father loved that about you. Ella has a moral compass," he used to say. "Thomas just has a compass that points to the nearest tavern." "Stop it," I said softly. "Just give me the papers, Thomas. I promised I would help you with the debts. The Duke will honor my word." "The Duke?" Thomas spat the word like a curse. "He's the reason we're here. If he hadn't plucked you off the road, you would be in a factory by now, and I would be free." He reached into his coat. My breath hitched. I expected papers. Instead, he pulled out a pistol. It was an old dueling pistol, heavy and rusted, but the bore looked dark and deadly. He leveled it at my chest. His hand was shaking so violently, the barrel wavered in the air. "I can't give you the papers, Ella," he whispered, tears leaking from his eyes. "Mother, she said there's no other way. She said as long as you are alive, the claim stands. She said I have to fix it." "Thomas, look at me," I said, forcing my voice to remain steady, though my heart was hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. "She is making you a murderer. You are a gambler, a cheat, a fool, but you are not a killer. Don't do this." "I have no choice," he screamed, stepping forward. "The creditors are coming for me on Monday. She promised to pay them if I did this. She promised." "She's lying to you," I shouted back. "She will let you hang for this. She'll claim she knew nothing about it." Thomas hesitated. The barrel lowered an inch. Doubt flickered in his watery eyes. "Drop the gun, Thomas." The voice came from everywhere and nowhere. "Julian." Thomas spun around, panicking, swinging the pistol wildly toward the trees. "Who's there? Show yourself!" "You are a child playing with fire!" Julian's voice boomed from the mist to the left. Thomas fired. Bang! The shot cracked through the silence, tearing bark off an oak tree. A puff of smoke obscured Thomas's vision. "Missed," Julian said, stepping out from behind a pillar of the folly, directly behind Thomas. Thomas tried to reload, fumbling with the powder flask, but he was too slow. Julian covered the distance in 3 strides. He didn't strike Thomas. He simply clamped a hand over the pistol and twisted. Thomas shrieked as his wrist snapped with a sickening crunch. The gun fell to the stones. Julian kicked Thomas behind the knees, sending him crashing into the mud. In a second, Julian had his knee in the center of Thomas's back, pinning him to the earth. "Where are the papers?" Julian snarled, pressing Thomas's face into the dirt. "I don't have them." Thomas sobbed into the mud. "She has them. She burned them this morning. I just came to kill her," Julian finished, his voice dropping to a terrifying, icy whisper. I ran forward. "Julian, stop! You'll kill him!" Julian looked up at me. His face was a mask of fury, his eyes wild. For a moment, I saw the devil of Derbyshire the rumours spoke of. He wanted to snap Thomas's neck. I could see the tension in his shoulders, the white-knuckled grip he had on Thomas's coat. "He tried to shoot you," Julian said, his voice devoid of humanity. "And he missed," I said, reaching out and placing my hand over Julian's clenched fist. "Let him go. We need him alive. If he dies, Catherine wins. She becomes the grieving mother." Julian stared at my hand on his. Slowly, the red haze seemed to clear from his eyes. He let out a long, shuddering breath and released his grip. He hauled Thomas up by his collar. Thomas hung limp, cradling his broken wrist, sobbing openly. "Get out of here," Julian commanded. "Run to the continent. Run to America. I don't care. But if I ever see you on English soil again, I will finish what I started." Thomas didn't need to be told twice. He scrambled away, slipping in the mud, and vanished into the fog, a broken, pathetic figure. I turned to Julian, relief flooding through me. "We're safe. He's gone." "Ella," Julian said. His voice was strange, strained. He took a step toward me and stumbled. "Julian?" I reached out to catch him. His heavy greatcoat was wet. But when I pulled my hand away, it wasn't just damp with mist. My glove was stained bright crimson. "He didn't miss entirely," Julian grunted, his knees buckling. Thomas hadn't been aiming at the trees when the gun went off. The ball had caught Julian in the side. "Oh God!" I gasped, the world tilting on its axis. "You're shot!" "It's a flesh wound," he managed, leaning heavily against a pillar, his face draining of color. "But we need to leave." The journey to the nearest coaching inn was a blur of panic and adrenaline. I drove the carriage myself, whipping the horses into a frenzy, my hands aching from the reins. Julian lay inside, pressing a linen cravat to his side to staunch the bleeding. We stopped at the Hanging Gate, a secluded inn 10 miles from the estate. I didn't care about propriety. I stormed into the tap room, demanding a private room, hot water, and clean bandages, throwing gold coins onto the counter until the innkeeper scrambled to obey. Upstairs, in a room that smelled of lavender and wood smoke, the reality of the situation crashed down on me. Julian was sitting on the edge of the bed, his shirt stripped off, his skin pale against the firelight. The wound was a jagged tear just above his hip. It was bleeding sluggishly, an ugly red furrow against his skin. "It passed through," he said through gritted teeth, examining the injury. "No ball to dig out. Lucky." "Lucky," I snapped, my hands shaking as I dipped a cloth into a basin of hot water mixed with antiseptic. "You took a bullet for me. That is not luck, Julian. That is stupidity." It was calculation. He winced as I pressed the hot cloth to the wound. He gripped the bedsheets, his knuckles turning white. "Better me than you." "Why?" I demanded, working quickly to clean the blood. "Why go this far? You could have just given me money. You could have sent me away. Why are you bleeding in a roadside inn for a girl you met a week ago?" He didn't answer immediately. He watched me work, his eyes dark and unfathomable. The silence stretched, heavy and intimate. The air in the room felt charged, the boundaries between us dissolving with every beat of my heart. "Because," he said finally, his voice rough, "when I looked at you that night in the rain, I didn't see a stranger. I saw myself." I paused, the bandage halfway wrapped around his torso. "What do you mean?" He leaned his head back against the headboard, closing his eyes. 10 years ago, my brother died. Everyone thinks I killed him for the title. The truth is, he fell. We were arguing on the cliffs. He was drunk. He slipped. I tried to catch him, Ella. I held his hand for what felt like an eternity, but I wasn't strong enough. He slipped through my fingers. A tear leaked from the corner of his eye. I spent 10 years punishing myself, he whispered. I let the world call me a monster because I felt like one. I shut everyone out. And then I saw you, cast out by your own blood, alone. And I thought, not this time. I couldn't save my brother, but I could save you. I stared at him, my heart breaking for the man behind the mask. The monster of Blackwood was just a man haunted by grief. You did save me, I whispered, tying off the bandage. I sat on the edge of the bed, facing him. But you didn't just save me from the cold, Julian. You taught me how to fight. You gave me my voice back. He opened his eyes. They were clear now, intense and burning with an emotion I hadn't dared to name. You always had the voice, he said softly. I just gave you the room to scream. He reached out, his hand covering mine where it rested on the mattress. His skin was fever-hot, his grip strong. Ella, he murmured, if we go back there, if we finish this, it will get ugly. Catherine will not go quietly. She will destroy your reputation to save her own. Are you ready for that? I don't care about my reputation, I said, realizing it was true. I care about justice. And I looked down at our joined hands. I care about you. Julian made a low sound in his throat. He leaned forward, wincing slightly from the pain, and brought his other hand up to cup the back of my neck. His thumb stroked the sensitive skin behind my ear. I am a ruined man, he warned, his face inches from mine. I have too many ghosts. Then let me help you to lay them to rest, I breathed. He kissed me. It wasn't the chaste kiss of a storybook romance. It was desperate, tasting of brandy and danger and relief. It was the collision of two lonely souls who had finally found their anchor. I kissed him back with everything I had, pouring all my fear and gratitude into the touch. When we finally pulled apart, breathless, the world outside had changed. The fog was lifting. Thomas said the papers were burned, I said, resting my forehead against his. We have no evidence. Julian's eyes hardened again. The strategist returned. Thomas thinks the papers were burned, Julian corrected, but Catherine is a hoarder of secrets. She wouldn't destroy her only leverage against Thomas. If Thomas ever turned on her, she would need proof that he was complicit. She kept them. But where? Thomas said she has a safe, Julian said, but the key, she wears it. I remembered the locket Catherine always wore, a heavy gold oval she never took off, claiming it contained a lock of my father's hair. I knew for a fact my father was bald when he died. The locket, I said. The key is in her locket. Julian nodded. He tried to stand, swaying slightly. I pushed him back down gently. You need to rest, I insisted. We can't go back tonight. We have to, he said, though he didn't fight my hands. The creditors come for Thomas on Monday. Catherine will be making her move to liquidate the estate assets tomorrow. If we don't stop her by dawn, the money will be in a Swiss account, and she will be in Paris. You can barely walk, I argued. I don't need to walk, Julian grinned, a sharp, feral expression that made my heart flutter. I just need to make an entrance. You, my dear Ella, are going to do the rest. What is the plan? We are going to invade Magdalen Manor, he said. Not as guests, but as executioners. He pointed to his coat pocket. Take my seal. Send a rider to the magistrate in the village. Tell him the Duke of Blackwood requires his presence at Magdalen Manor at sunrise. Tell him to bring irons. And us? I asked. We, Julian said, wincing as he shifted his leg, are going to crash a dinner party. The sun was just cresting over the horizon, painting the sky in violent shades of bruise purple and gold when our carriage thundered through the gates of Madeline Manor. The iron gates had been locked, but Julian's driver smashed through the chain with a sledgehammer, a ringing declaration of war. Inside the dining room, Lady Catherine was holding court. She sat at the head of the table, flanked by two nervous bankers and a pile of deeds. She was moments away from selling the timber rights to the estate, liquidating my heritage for quick cash. The double doors flew open with a crash that rattled the fine china. Catherine jumped, knocking over her tea. "What is the meaning of this?" I stepped into the room. I was still wearing my mud-splattered dress from the Folly, my hair wild, my eyes burning. Beside me, Julian leaned heavily on an ivory-handled cane, his face pale, but his presence as terrifying as a storm cloud. "The sale is cancelled," I announced, my voice ringing off the vaulted ceiling. "You?" Catherine laughed, though her eyes darted nervously to Julian. "You have no authority here. You are trespassing." "I am returning," I corrected, walking to the table and placing my hands flat on the mahogany, my father's table. "And you are leaving, in irons." "Get them out!" Catherine shrieked at the footman. "I wouldn't," Julian rumbled. He didn't raise his voice, but the footman froze. "Unless you wish to be accomplices to fraud and attempted murder." "Murder?" The lead banker stood up, looking alarmed. "Thomas confessed," I lied smoothly. It was the final gamble. "We have him in custody. He told us everything, Catherine. The forgery, the debts, the gun." Catherine's face went grey. He lies. He is a sick boy." "Then explain the locket," I said, pointing to the heavy gold oval resting against her throat. "Thomas said the key to the wall safe is inside. The safe where you keep the tracing paper you used to forge my father's signature." Catherine's hand flew to her throat, clutching the jewellery. It was the tell I needed. "Magistrate!" Julian barked. From the hallway the village magistrate entered, followed by two constables. He looked apologetic but firm. "Lady Catherine, I must ask you to open the locket." "This is preposterous. This is my private property," she screamed, backing away. "Open it, or they will take it from you," I said, stepping closer. "It's over, Catherine. The game is done." With a trembling hand, she unclasped the locket. A small, silver key fell onto the table with a damning clink. The magistrate took the key. He walked to the portrait of my father, swung it aside, and opened the hidden safe. Inside, nestled between stacks of banknotes, was a sheaf of vellum. He held it up to the light. It was covered in practice signatures. Baron Frederick Madeline, written over and over again in Catherine's sharp hand. The silence in the room was absolute. "Lady Catherine Madeline," the magistrate said, gesturing to the constables, "you are under arrest." As they dragged her out, she didn't scream. She just looked at me with pure, unadulterated hate. "You will never be happy," she hissed. "You are just a girl." "I am not just a girl," I whispered as the doors closed behind her. "I am the lady of this house." I turned to the room. The bankers were scrambling to pack their bags. The servants were bowing. But I only saw one person. Julian was slumping against the doorframe, his strength finally failing him. I ran to him, catching him before he fell. "We did it," he rasped, a weak smile touching his lips. "Yes," I said, tears finally spilling over. "We did." 6 months later, the rumours about the Duke of Blackwood had changed. They no longer called him the devil. They called him the husband of Ella Madeline. We stood on the balcony of Madeline Manor, watching the summer sun set over the lake. My home was restored. The debts were paid. Thomas was in America, and Catherine was in a cell. Julian wrapped his arms around me from behind, his chin resting on my shoulder. The wound in his side had healed into a scar, a permanent reminder of the price we paid. "They say," Julian whispered, "that a wolf and a lamb can never lie down together." I turned in his arms, looking up into those steel-grey eyes that had once terrified me and now held my entire world. "Then it is a good thing," I smiled, pulling him down for a kiss, "that I am no longer a lamb." And so, Ella Madeline didn't just reclaim her title, she reclaimed her life. She went from a shivering girl in the rain to a woman who brought down a tyrant, proving that sometimes the only way to survive a storm is to become the lightning. It's a reminder to us all, when the world closes a door, you don't just knock, you kick it down. If you enjoyed this story of revenge, romance, and justice, please hit that like button. It really helps the channel. And tell me in the comments, have you ever had to fight for something that was wrongfully taken from you? I want to hear your stories. Don't forget to subscribe and ring the bell so you never miss a chapter. Until next time.